Anthropology is the study of humans. Should be pretty easy. Study of human beings, human people. But one of the issues is, how do you know who's in this human thing? What makes us all human so that we know that when we see somebody, you're like, hey, you're a human, I'm a human, we're all human together. What we might call human universals or things that make us the same so that we can lump us together in this human category. And one of the funny paradoxes is the things that make us the same, say, like that you can understand what I'm saying, like language, are also the things that maybe make us different. Y no puedes entender lo que está diciendo. No? So the things that make us the same are also the things we differentiate ourselves on. And we even tease other people about, or even worse, send them to schools to get them properly educated because we don't believe they're speaking a real language. We deny that their language is even a real thing. We prohibit them from practicing certain beliefs or religions. You might look at another person and say, how can you eat that? Or why would you do that with a person? Why would you do that other thing? And anthropology asks us to look at these differences, and we're not going to accept what everybody does. Obviously, there's still right and wrong, but we want to understand what people are doing in their own framework. Anthropology is a subject that is under attack right now. A lot of people have attacked us for teaching evolution, for example. They don't like it when they teach evolution. But more than that, because it suggests that there's not necessarily one right way to live or one right way to do things. The things that we think are right or natural or inevitable may not be all right or natural or inevitable. That's sometimes easy to do with things like food or clothing because you're like, oh, I'll try your food. Oh, that's cool. Or that's a different dress I'll put on. That's nice. But sometimes it's harder to do with things like parenting because people get really, really upset when somebody seems to be parenting babies or raising kids in a different way. That's what we're going to be looking at today is an article that I sent you from 1998. It was written before most of you were born, called Our Babies Ourselves. It's a condensed version of a book that Meredith Small put out in the late 1990s. Our Babies Ourselves is our first reading. Our article begins with a scene from the Gusii mothers in Kenya, and the anthropologist Robert Levine shows them a film of some North American US mothers doing things, parenting with their kids. What do the Gusii mothers think of American mothers and their parenting? What's their thoughts? Levine or Small uses an even stronger word. He says they were appalled at what they saw, that these American women are clearly incompetent mothers. Astonished because they didn't know what they were doing. They were not doing the right things. They were not caring for the kids. They were not, a kid would cry, they wouldn't respond. Now, if we saw a film of their parenting practices, we might also be astonished, hopefully not appalled, but some of the things they do might seem strange to us. What do we call this in anthropology when you see somebody else doing something that we all have to do, like parenting or food or eating, and it's strange, and you start getting appalled and conclude that those people are incompetent people. They don't know what they're doing. What's that called? Yeah. Cultural centrism. Oh, that's so good. You're right on track. Ethnocentrism, but we could say cultural centrism. Same thing. It would mean the same thing because that's the ethno is a root word that is like cultural. It's like a cultural group or an ethnic group, and it means that you think your group is at the center of things. Your culture, cultural center, your culture or your group, the way you do things is the center. And the truth of the matter is, on an everyday basis, when we're going about our life, we need to be a little bit ethnocentric in the sense of we can't be questioning everything we do at every second that we're around because then you wouldn't be able to live your life. You just have to assume that you're doing things in the right way. You don't want to be always calling what you're doing into question. But every so often, we want to step back and look at other practices and the things that we're doing in those lights. And just to think of what you're doing as the good thing to do is fine, but what we don't want to do is go into this, you might say, a more extreme version of ethnocentrism is the assumption that your way is the right way to do things and their way is the wrong way. You're appalled by how they're doing things. That your way is the natural way to do things, and they're not really natural or not really human. That your way is given to us by the divine, and their way is who knows where it came from, or that your way is superior and their way is inferior. We have a different approach to this in anthropology, which we call cultural relativism, which is the idea that we just try to look at other people's practices and to understand what they are doing before we make a judgment on them, to try and put ourselves in their shoes. That old saying, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes before you see what's going on. Now, there's a good example of this in the article. It's on page 3 by Edward Tronick, and it's called Doctor's Orders. And in this little section, he's trying to train some residents in pediatrics, and they see a mother who seems to have a thriving baby, but is being cared for by the 2-year-old is being cared for by a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old. They give this mother a lecture on what she should be doing, but the thing is, her scores, the baby's scores, the baby is thriving. At the end of this, the doctor says, I know I have helped residents broaden their views when their lectures on good mothering are replaced by such comments as, what a gorgeous baby. I can't imagine how you manage both work and 3 others at home. In this sense, now the resident or the new doctor is being trained to understand that people have different practices and different needs, and maybe that is a way that you could raise a kid. Cultural relativism is what we try to do in anthropology before we make a judgment about other people's practices. Now, I do want to be clear here that that doesn't mean that just, hey, anything goes, everybody's cool, whatever you do is cool, because we can also use cultural relativism to understand why other people might do things that are not good for society or good for them as a society. And I would say, when expanding on this example, I'm not sure this mother really wants to have to work and have 3 kids at home. There might be a huge lack of childcare issue in our society, which is forcing her to be in this situation. We don't want to use cultural relativism as an excuse or, oh, well, that's just how they do it, because that person might not like the situation they're in, and it might not be good for society to have so little childcare available, or childcare is so expensive that people can't even afford it and they have to go to work and leave little kids at home. Maybe that's not a good idea. So we don't want to romanticize other situations. That mother might want affordable childcare and just not have access to it. She's making the best of her situation. We can understand this as a choice that people make and critique that society, but we also can understand that there are different ways to raise kids and provide parenting things. For many people, since this article was written, there have been whole kinds of ideas to go, at least in pediatrics, to go beyond this ethnocentric approach, which assumes one way is the correct way, and develop something more like what has been called ethnopediatrics or ethnomedicine, in which people respect other ideas about how you might raise kids. This article has a lot of examples. One of them is how often do you hold the child and how often do you pay attention to their cries? So I would say in our society, we often have, as Barr says in this reading, a scheduled approach where it's like, okay, you sit there for a while and I go do this thing. Whereas in other societies, you're always carrying the baby around. The baby is always attached to your body in some way on a sling or harness, and you're very attentive to those cries. And it statistically does. There are certain times of life when babies just cry a lot. And it's interesting that once you get tuned to the cry of a baby sound, it's one of the hardest sounds to unhear, or once you start to hear it, you almost have to respond to it. I read once that the CIA would use loud baby cry sounds. They would blast them in if they're trying to get somebody out of a building or something that would irritate people so much that it'd be a form of torture for them. But in any case, in other societies, you would respond rapidly to that situation. There's also some debate about when about feeding and how you should wean an infant and put them on solid food and when to wean and how that takes place across different places. Breastfeeding rates in our society went way down for a long time. They're coming back up now because we've realized that that's better for the infant than formula, but still in this country, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, most infants are weaned or stop breastfeeding by the age of 6 months. When that doesn't seem to be across other primate groups and across other societies, that seems to be pretty early. And so there are people who argue that it would probably help with the crying and other things to hold off or to continue more breastfeeding until later on. But people who could get very upset about this, if somebody is breastfeeding in public or doing these kinds of things, people used to get hugely into fights about these things in our society. The other example they use, and this is perhaps a little bit more controversial in terms of we are now told by the pediatricians that you really should have your babies on their backs and in a separate crib because people are worried about sudden infant death syndrome, which is true, and you want to be careful with this practice, but it seems like when parents properly co-sleep or sleep together with their infants until a certain age, it helps to regulate and synchronize the breathing of the newborn infant. Like the newborns in the very early on, they have this quirky, weird breathing pattern, or it isn't even a pattern, but if you take the baby close to you and breathe with it, it synchronizes with your own body and helps them get their breathing in line. Now, we usually, for the most part, we want to prohibit co-sleeping. We try to wean early, we try to keep the baby off in its own place and on a schedule, unlike in other societies. What do you think? Why are we doing that? What do we think we're doing when we do that in our society? We really like independence. We believe that what we're doing is creating independent kids who can do things on their own, and they're going to be individuals. If you've seen these giant strollers walking down the street, but it's like we give each kid an SUV before it's like huge amounts of room. In all societies, child rearing is an expression of your values and is trying to both express your values and to inculcate your values into that developing child. Now, in the United States, we tend to place a value on individualism and independence, In many other societies, they're placing a value on social integration, on being part of the community, on understanding who you are in relation to other people. In some ways, strangely, I'm not sure that our practices are producing individualism and independence. Maybe we end up with kids that just get mad and aren't so happy as they grow up. But that's what we say we're doing. Many of these examples are from far off societies, but early on, they also talk about the Dutch, who are far away over there in Europe, but in some ways they may be closer to the United States in cultural ways. And what's interesting is the Dutch have also different parenting practices, which, if you measure it biologically, they emphasize keeping the baby calm. And then the infants end up sleeping more, end up sleeping a couple hours more, which is always nice if you're a new parent that your kids are sleeping more. Rest, regularity, and cleanliness, which the Dutch call the three R's. And one of them's easy because that's pretty close to ours. There's an R, rest, and that's an R, that's regularity. And then we get a true Dutch word, which a true other word, which means cleanliness in Dutch. So the three R's. By following this regime and having their society organized in such a way, they prioritize a more regular schedule, and it seems to come out well in their sleep outcomes. Now, when I had kids, I tried to do this. I was like, that sounds good. I want them to sleep more. I was all about rest, regularity, maybe not cleanliness so much, but I was trying to do this, trying it out. Do you think it worked? Can you do this on your own? But what do the Dutch have that I don't, that I'm not? That is one huge difference is they have paid family leave time. Some of the most generous family leave time in the world, and even fathers. And I think it was in Sweden that they started forcing the fathers to take time off because they wanted to make sure that happened. Yes, paid time leave definitely helps with this system. Also, their society is organized so that things are within walking distance of your house. So if I had to go to the grocery store, I don't have to drive 2 or 3 miles or even more. For those of you who live in areas where that's a thing, you have to drive to things just to get to other places. If everything is around and you're taking care of each other as neighbors, your whole society is organized around these ideas. It makes it much easier to implement them. You can try as an individual to do these things, but these are really about social organization. Now, one of the funny things about human babies is they're so silly when they come out. They're very helpless and dependent on their parents. You have to carry them around. If you've been on a farm or something, other infants come out and little horses are running around already, or most other animals, they're infants. It doesn't take them very long and they're off doing their own thing. Human beings or human babies are in some ways, because of a combination of two traits that we'll talk about, are very helpless for the first 6 months, 9 months, 25 years of life. One of them is that we're bipedal. We walk around. We are habitually bipedal, but we also have large brains. There's a reason giving birth is called labor, because you have this relatively large brain infant trying to get through the birth canal. It has to twist and rotate that head out. And then the brain has to do even more growing as the baby is developing. Small calls this that humans are born neurologically unfinished. And this is a crucial phrase for me, and it underlies a lot of what anthropology is about, because we're born and our head size and our brain still has to grow. We're very helpless and dependent on the people that are taking care of us for the first year in many years of life. What happens is that we are learning our society or our culture or our ways of doing things as our brain is developing. The things that we learn during those early stages come to feel completely natural to us. So you're carrying a baby around and you're telling it who its uncle and aunt is and who it's related to. And when you dance and listen to certain music with the baby, it's going into its brain, and the language stuff, it's all getting absorbed as you're biologically growing. I talked about even something like how your heart rate and your heart patterns or the way you breathe are going to be influenced by the people that are carrying you and singing to you and dancing with you as your baby. You're becoming a social person in your biology. Our biology is already becoming part of a society as we're developing in that society, and you become a very particular human being in that society. Now, you can learn other things, you can go to other places and learn them, but this crucial early learning takes place that incorporates culture into our developing biology. For anthropology, when people get into these debates about whether it's nature or nurture, whether it's the innate or acquired, and for anthropology, there isn't really a line between nature and nurture, because as we come out and as we develop, we are acquiring things that are into our developing biology. So you won't find in anthropology something that we would call human nature outside of the particular way in which we become human. And people have been developing different ways to parent and raise kids for hundreds, thousands of years in different societies and different environments. There's not a single way or a natural way or a baseline way that I can say this is the way that people should or have always parented. So there's two big takeaways from this article. The first is this idea of trying to adjust our framework and trying to acquire some cultural relativism when it comes to other practices, to recognize ethnocentrism in ourselves and sometimes in others as well, that everybody maybe has a little bit of ethnocentrism, but to try and look around and adjust that. And the other takeaway is that as we develop, our biology and our cultural are intertwined or combined together. Some anthropologists call this a biocultural approach, to indicate that both biology and culture are working at the same time. And it's something we'll be looking at as we go into our textbook chapters and development of human beings, the different fields of anthropology.